Talk right here on Next Door Radio and nextdoorradio.com. My name is Trey Snide, joining by way of our Zoom recording this morning and recorded for presentation at this time, Shanta Johnson. She is with Reflective Counseling Services. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I'm well. How are you?
I am fantastic. Thank you so much for kind of spending some time with us this morning. Really just to kind of introduce who you are, what Reflective Counseling Services is. So let's kind of dive right in, okay? Let's
Sure, no problem.
How only you can introduce yourself, okay?
Well, like you said, I'm Shanta Johnson. I am a licensed clinical social worker. And I started Reflective Counseling Services probably a little over 2 years ago. And my focus is to provide counseling services to older adults and caregivers. So that's the population I try to target. I do talk to adults 18 and up, but I enjoy working with older adults.
Okay. So, Ms. Johnson, why is it so important to when you get into a profession, and I know you love what you do, just talking back and
Yes.
forth off of just the phone wise and meeting in person, but why is it so important to really speak to adults and have just a sit back and say, hey, come talk to me? Why is that so important for caregivers and adults?
I feel like, in all honesty, like older adults in our society, I feel like for the most part, they're kind of cast aside. They're like castaways. They're seen sometimes as insignificant, a burden, but older adults, they have so much resilience, so much wisdom. And if God willing, if we live that long and we start to have declining health, we'll need someone to take care of us as well. So I think they are integral to our society, and I think they're just often overlooked. Even with policies in the government, you notice a lot of policies focus on younger adults or children, really. But the older adults, I just feel like they're isolated. Particularly the past 2 years with the pandemic. If you watch the news, they kept saying older adults, they need to stay home. But then you isolated them, but now it's to the point where, they start to feel depressed. They feel anxious about going out. And let's be honest, when you really heard the stories, a lot of people that were dying were younger adults. So, and I think this is a critical time. I know some older adults have the misconception about counseling. Adults in general, some people will say, I'm not crazy. I said, that's not what it's about. It's not about being crazy. It's about seeking help and knowing when you need that help.
Yeah. And it is a very hard thing to really say, hey, I am struggling. I'm actually having a hard time. Can you help me? Because I'm speaking for myself now. And ask my wife, I don't really like asking for help. Now I'll go out and talk to clients and, for advertising and marketing and things like that. And my dad said it the other day, I said, you do a terrible job of actually speaking about yourself. And that's just me. And so I've never really been interested in speaking about me. I can speak to you. I can speak to our clients. I can speak to, sports people. But when it comes to me, I have a hard time with that. But why is that though?
I think we have a hard time telling someone else we need something. We need something from them. I feel like a lot of men have that issue, but women do too. I do. Sometimes I have a difficult time saying I need help. It's almost like we're taught to be independent, to not need anyone, to do it on our own. When we talk about the American dream, you talk about what you've achieved. You don't necessarily say this is what we did together. It's more like what I've done for me, or what I've done for my family. But even myself, I struggled after I had my first daughter. I was overwhelmed. And I thought, maybe I thought too much of myself. Having a child, I was like, oh, I can do this, no problem. But I realized it was an adjustment. I was working full time. I had a child that was completely dependent on me for everything. And I went to see a counselor. And she told me, she said, you're adjusting because you're trying to be a wife, you're trying to be a mother, and you're trying to work full time. And I needed to help. I needed to talk to someone who was objective, someone who did not know me.
And look, before we started recording here this morning, I told you I have a 4-year-old and I am born slap out. I love him to death. I love being a father.
Yes.
He wears me out. And it's good to just, hey, I have somebody potentially. Again, I'm 34 years old.
Sure.
I'm not in the caregiver aspect of it. I'm not into the elderly adults. I have great friends that I get
Sure.
that are elderly adults, and I
Mm-hmm.
look for them for wisdom. So it's good to be able to say, hey, you can head over here if you're struggling, and not just it really it can be between 30 and up.
It
Yes,
really can.
yeah.
And you notice some of us too with our parents, as we get older and our parents get older, you start to realize you may become a caregiver for a parent, or your parent may become your caregiver. So no matter what age, it can be a struggle. It's difficult, very difficult, especially when you're working full time. And I've noticed some people care for their parents, but then they're working and they have kids and they're married. So I'm like, that's a lot. That's a lot for one person.
Again, Shanta Johnson with Reflective Counseling Service joins us here by way of our recorded for presentation at this time on our local talk program here on Next Door Radio. So if anybody's never told you, you have a great website, by the way. I'm looking at it.
Thank you. I try to make it user friendly.
Yeah, I love the pop-ups. That's all I mean. So that tells me what it is all about. But let's kind of dive deep into the more personal side of what you do, if you're allowed to kind of do that.
Yes, I can talk about that. I mentioned it a little bit on my website. So my mother and father divorced when I was very young. And so my grandparents became my second set of parents. So it was almost like sometimes my mother would say to my grandmother, talk to her, especially if I was upset about something, because she knew my grandmother had my mother was nurturing, but my grandmother was just that, almost like a Southern belle, very soft spoken. And if she talked to you, you wanted to listen. Even if you disagreed, you wanted to just calm down and listen to what she had to say. She's sweet as pie. She really is. But I also noticed, growing up, and as my grandparents started to face some health issues, they had 7 children. So the children started to be very important as far as with their health. My mother particularly, because she was the oldest, but she had a heart for it. She started getting involved with their doctor's appointments. Unfortunately, my grandfather had metastatic melanoma twice, and now he's on his 3rd time.
I'm sorry to hear
And so she really did a lot for them, and the siblings were involved too. And I was like, if my grandparents didn't have them, or even the grandkids, what would they do? What do other people do? So I just even my grandparents, my grandfather, he's the opposite. He's very old school. He definitely believes in the gender roles within a marriage. But I still I tell him, how can I say, he's abrasive. He says exactly what's on his mind, no filter. But there's still, even with that, I love that because you know exactly where he's coming from, what he's thinking. So, when I work with older adults, they're either kind of like my grandfather, my grandmother, or just kind of in between.
And how difficult is it to kind of alternate between those different personalities? Again, just like you, my grandfather was the same exact way.
Yes.
I laughed it off because
that's all I do. I laugh. I think it's hilarious with my grandfather. I just when I start talking to them, what you'll find out, the person with the hardest exterior is as soft as a big teddy bear. We all have problems and issues. It's just the way we handle them. And sometimes people don't handle them in the best way. So you may find someone who's abrupt with you, someone who's mean, someone who's very short-tempered. But when they talk to me and I tell them what I do and I listen, after a few sessions, they start to soften up. Particularly men, sometimes have their guard up. And after talking to them, they'll say, I actually enjoy talking to you. So it's just a way of just talking to them. Now, don't get me wrong. It's much easier when people are willing to participate. I had one client, his primary care doctor recommended him to me. And I think he was a bit hesitant, but I don't push myself on people. I just told him, if you want to talk or ready to talk, just give me a call. So I always leave it up to the individual.
That's perfect. Ms. Johnson with Reflective Counseling Services joins us here on our local talk program. So how can our listeners, anybody interested to get a hold of you, how can they get a hold of you? I know your website, reflectivecounsel.com, but is there
Yes.
any other way they can kind of get a hold of you?
Yes. And my direct phone number is 910-830-0704.
Perfect. Now, if one or two things, and I'm gonna leave the floor open for you to kind
Sure.
of speak openly, if you
Mhm.
will. One or two things that you want to make sure, if they haven't heard anything else from this conversation today, what would you want them to remember from today?
That we all need help. We're all humans. So even if it's not me, reach out to somebody. Reach out to a counselor, a therapist, whatever you need to do, just reach out to someone.
Ms. Johnson, thank you so much for spending just a few moments of your day with
Sure.
us
Thank
today.
you.
I appreciate you. Thank you for what you do. Again, I have a grandma that still does caregiving, so and she
Wow.
loves it every single day. And I told her she's
Yes.
funky than I am, which is scary. So she loves it. But again, thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Thank you.
God bless you.
You
Live
too.
Your Best Life Reflective Counsel Services was created to assist older adults and caregivers in need of counseling service for depression, anxiety, isolation, chronic illness, caregiving burnout, and more. Visit their website, reflectivecounsel.com, and all, of course, on social media as well. Until next time, I am Trey Snide. She's Miss Johnson, Reflective Counsel Services. God bless. We'll see you later.